Okay, so we're starting 8-5, and this is all about factoring, and we're going to be factoring things eventually that look like this. But before we even get into doing any problems, I just want to go over a skill that's going to be really, really important for you to be able to master in order to do this type of factoring. Okay, so I have this table here, and in the table I have two columns. There's the adds to column and the multiplies to column. And so what your task is going to be is to find a pair of numbers, and that pair of numbers should add up to the one in the adds to column and multiplies to the one in the multiplies to column. Okay, so for example, in this first row, I'm saying I'd like to find a pair of numbers that adds up to 7, and the same pair of numbers has to multiply to 12. Okay, so the easiest way to handle this type of problem is to think about the multiply column first. If we think about the things that multiply to 12, well, I'd think about 1 and 12, I'd think about 2 and 6, and I'd think about, and I'll write it over here, 3 and 4. Right, these are all of the pairs of numbers that multiply to give me 12. Okay? So I'm going to look at these three pairs and say, which of these three pairs also happens to add up to 7? And the answer is 3 times 4 is 12, 3 plus 4 is 7. So in this column, I'm just going to write, well, the numbers that I like are 3 and 4. Okay? And so when we look down these columns, we're just going to see different cases of this. Okay, so in the second one, I need you to find numbers that multiply to 18. And the same two numbers need to add to negative 19. So once we start throwing negatives in, we have more of a challenge. Okay? So again, when I think about 18, here's what I know. I know 18 and 1. I know 2 and 9. And I know 6 and 3. Right? Those are all of the things that multiply to 18. Well, it doesn't look like any of these add to negative 19, but 18 and 1 does add up to positive. Right, so if you remember a rule in multiplication, that negative times negative also gives me a positive answer. So another possibility here is, well, I could say negative 18 and negative 1. They also multiply to positive 18, but they will add up to negative 19. So this is where the challenge is going to be with this type of problem, is you're going to have to consider all of the negative multiplication possibilities. In this case, negative times negative does give me a positive 18. But when I add them, I will get a negative answer. Okay, so that's going to be the challenge here. Okay, so in my third example, I need a negative 32 product, and I need a positive 4 sum. So again, I'm thinking about numbers that add up to, or multiply to 32. I have 1 and 32. I have 2 and 16, and I have, I'll put over here, 8 and 4. Okay, and that looks like the things that multiply to 16. So again, I'm looking at this and I'm saying, well, none of these adds up to 4, but the problem is that in this case, I need a negative 32. So the only way to make that happen is if one of the pair of numbers is negative. So for example, I could say 1 and negative 32, that multiplies to negative 32. 2 and negative 16, well, that works. 8 and negative 4 will work, right? One of the two numbers needs to be negative, and the other one has to be positive, in order to get this negative result here. Okay? So we have to figure out, where should I put the negative sign in order to make this negative but get a positive 4 when I add. Okay? And in this case, if you take a look right at this example I have here, 8 times negative 4 is negative 32. 8 plus negative 4 does give me a positive 4. Okay? So again, these are probably going to be the trickiest ones because you have to worry about the negative sign. So in this case, I'm going to say 8 and negative 4. Okay. And in the last example, another situation, I need a negative product and I also need a negative sum. So thinking about things that multiply to 12, well, we have those up here already, right? 3 and 4, 1 and 12, and 2 and 6. And again, I need to figure out, where do I attach a multiplication symbol? Where do I attach a negative symbol, so that I will get that negative 12, and then the sum is also negative. And so if I check these ones, it looks like if I put a negative 3 plus 4, well, that's a 1. Negative 4 plus 3, that's negative 1. Negative 1 and 12, well, that's 11. Negative 12 and positive 1, well, that's negative 11, right? So it looks like if I come down here, if I check negative 2 and 6, that's 4. And I put it right here. 2 times negative 6 gives me a negative 12. 2 plus negative 6 does give me a negative 4 result. Okay, so I'm going to say 2 and negative 6. So this skill here takes some practice. You can see, especially once we get down to negatives getting involved, it's a little bit more complicated. Okay, but it's an extremely important skill. Okay, so I'm actually going to stop the video here. I'm going to scroll down and give you some to try on your own. I'm going to ask you to think about all of the possibilities to multiply to 15 and add up to 8, and to go through and do all these examples, and then we'll make a whole separate video on how to use this skill to factor polynomials.